everyone. This is the Crime Cafe, where you get to hear from the best and the brightest crime, suspense, and thriller authors in the business. And I'm your host, Debbi Mack. Before I introduce my guest for this week, I'd like to remind you that you can get the Crime Cafe Season 1 story package with stories from all the authors interviewed here at Crime Cafe for only 99 cents if you go to my website, debbimack.com or crimecafe.net and click on the words Crime Cafe. It'll be there along with a place where you can buy t-shirts, coffee mugs, tote bags, and other Crime Cafe merchandise. So, with that out of the way, I'd like to introduce a really great writer, Kenneth Wishnia, or Ken Wishnia, as I call him. Ken is the author of a series that I really love, the Philomena Buscarcella series. I hope I'm saying that right. He also wrote a really great novel called The Fifth Servant, and his latest project is Jewish Noir, a book that he edited. So, Ken, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it because, as a writer, we know better than anybody that there are 10,000 books you could have been talking about. So
exactly.
I really appreciate that you chose Jewish Noir to talk about. It's nice to get the attention.
As it well deserves it. I've been reading some of the stories, and they're great. How did you get involved with editing it?
Yeah, everyone else backed out. No, it was actually, the idea was originally posed by Reed Coleman several years ago. Reed Farrell Coleman is, of course, author of the Mo Prager series, 3-time Shamus Award winner, and now he's incarnating Robert B. Parker's Jesse Stone series. And he is a frequent visitor to my English classes at Suffolk County Community College on Long Island, and where they really love him there. And then just one day we were talking, and he was kind of talking about the Akashic series of noirs, saying, sure, they've got Twin Cities noir, everybody's got a noir place now, but he sort of felt like Jewish noir, that's the thing. And, the idea struck me, and we kind of batted it around for several years until sort of the moment seemed right. I mean, I finished a novel and had some time, and, he had some time, and we pitched it around, and eventually he signed that contract with Putnam to be Robert B. Parker's spirit medium. Uh-huh. And it included a sort of no competition clause of some kind, and so he had to back out of actually co-editing, and which I thought was a little strange. It's like, really, Putnam, New York Times bestseller series there, they really think a co-editing an anthology from a small press constitutes competition. But just one of those. Yeah, but just one of those things. Yeah, we don't want to mess up this deal. So he had to back out of editing it, and it ended up just being me. And so I guess one of the things I was aiming for was to go farther afield and not choose the usual suspects, and among other things, to choose some lesser-known authors from around a little bit around the world, from Canada, but also especially several authors who I feel are, emerging. I mean, they may have a couple of books, but they're not big names, and yet I think they wrote terrific stories for us. Like Travis Richardson, for example, is in here, and Jedediah Ayers, who, of course, contributed an absolutely insane piece of mayhem, and Rabbi Adam Fisher. So, I knew we had to have a rabbi in Jewish noir. So yeah, he's certainly someone who is absolutely not known in the field of crime. And, of course, his story doesn't actually have what would be typically called a crime, but his story is definitely funny and sad at the same time, and I believe does fit a type of noir.
Yes. Noir fiction is a little bit different from crime fiction, I would think. You can have a crime, but it can be without a crime.
Well, that was something certainly I was going for here. As a matter of fact, I'm sure your listeners will be well aware of this. Practically every gig we've done, someone asks, so what's your definition of noir?
Uh-huh.
Oh, God, people don't get this in romance, and no one says, so what's your definition of
I know.
But for whatever reason, or even hard-boiled, really, or cozy or something, unless it's really to a crowd who's not familiar with crime fiction. But yeah, something about noir, and maybe you have your own ideas, like why on earth do people always want a definition? So, one of the things we went for is definitely broadening it, because Reed's quote about this is, Jewish noir is the most redundant title in literature.
I was just going to say.
Yeah, his feeling is like, the Jewish experience is noir. If you're Jewish or you're writing about Jewish themes, it's inherently noir. But to give you an example, I had a couple of authors, especially the ones who've won literary prizes, as well as crime fiction prizes, like Canada's Nancy Rickler. First of all, S.J. Roseanne recommended her, so of course I thought, yeah, sure, and I emailed her in Canada, and she actually emailed back saying, my father just died. I can't possibly think about writing anything right now, so of course I emailed back saying, I understand completely, I'm sorry to hear that, I hope, wishing you a speedy recovery kind of thing, and went on to deal with other things. Then about 8 months later, out of nowhere, I got an email from her with a story attached, where she said, I finally sat down to just let out some feelings, and something unfroze inside of me, and this story came out. And what she did was she changed the gender, so it's a male character, but basically, yes, his father has just died, and one of the main plot threads is he's trying to come up with the eulogy, because he's supposed to give the eulogy, and he keeps having these false starts. He comes up with a sentence and says, oh, that doesn't work, and so, clearly, spoken and unspoken, he's saying you cannot sum up a man's life in a few words. And, I thought it was a, very powerful and moving story, but she was very hesitant about submitting it and maybe reworking it, saying, well, it's not really noir, there's no crime in it. And, I said, you are writing about the inevitability and finality of death, the lack of closure, because we Americans love to talk about closure, but really, when a parent dies, nothing's ever going to fill that gap.
Exactly.
The pain might go away, but there's not really anything like closure, and the inability or the inadequacy of words to fill that gap or make us feel better. So I said, that's plenty noir.
Yeah.
There doesn't have to be a detective who is betrayed by a femme fatale, though, I certainly love those classic genre tropes.
But a movie like DOA, for instance,
right,
has the same sort of theme, the inevitability of death.
There you go. I think, for people who are actually looking for sort of, very classic film noir type plot lines, they're not necessarily going to find that here. There is a whole section of authors who are, I would call them unapologetically genre, just totally taking it on. I think Charles Ardai is a great one, where I've told him, it's just like a classic B movie from Monogram Pictures of Allied Artists. It doesn't have any highfalutin literary aspirations, but damn does it slam me in the face on the first page. and it accomplishes exactly what it sets out to do. Gary Phillips has got one that I told him, no paranormal stuff. Let's go for that tough urban Gary Phillips. We managed to get Eddie Muller to send us one, the Tsar of Noir himself, and the film noir preservationist. So he's got a film noir story here. It's probably the closest one. So we do have a number of authors where, yes, they deliver that experience. And actually, Jedediah Ayers' story is called Twisted Shiksa. And when he emailed me that, I said, you had me at the title. Whatever story goes with that, running with. But, again, to give you another example of a not the usual suspect is Tasha Kaminski, who actually, it turns out, this will be or is her first professionally published story in the U.S., and she did not put it in her bio, but she announced it when we did a gig at the Houston JCC together a couple of weeks ago, that she's actually Stuart Kaminski's daughter, MWA Grandmaster Stuart Kaminski, and let's just say, Stuart was nice to me and supportive, and I just felt like it would be good karma to, invite his daughter to submit, because I knew she was a creative writer and had some work to her credit. And she too submitted something that I think is absolutely not the usual suspect type work. But she too also felt like, I'm not really a noir writer. I don't know how to deal with a murder mystery. And I told her, your story is about a young woman who is clearly from a very traditional Jewish background and who feels complete disaffection for and alienation from the community she's supposed to be a part of. You don't get more noir than that. Even though, the character is not, there's no expressionistic shadows or, femme fatales betraying returning World War II vets or something. Though again, I certainly love those classic scenarios. So in that sense, we're going farther afield.
Well, it sounds like you have a diverse collection of stories.
Oh, yes.
From writers around the world, you said?
Yeah, well, I mean, U.S. and Canada.
U.S. and Canada. Around the continent.
and one story that's being translated, that I've translated from Yiddish, that was first published in the Fauverts in Yiddish in 1912. So you could kind of count that as Russia a little bit. A Russian immigrant writing in Yiddish in the Fauverts 100 years ago. That counts as a foreign country at this point, I would say. But yes.
Well, it sounds really cool. Tell me a little bit about, let's talk about The Fifth Servant. I remember you wrote that one after many years of research, I believe.
Oh, yes.
It was a very special book for you. I'd like you to talk about it a little bit and what prompted you to write it.
Sure. Well, I mean, it sort of reflects my autobiographical trajectory as well. I always tell people marrying a Catholic got me interested in Judaic studies. My family was, sort of totally assimilated, second and third generation American Jews, which meant that, the primary expressions of Jewish culture in my family were bagels and Woody Allen movies, which is not a bad start. You go pretty far with that. But, absolutely no religious training and that sort of thing. And, when I was about to marry into a family of, devout practicing Catholics, I said, okay, I'm going to learn something about her culture. I'm going to read the New Testament. And I'm reading this thing on a bus to New Jersey, because that's where she lived at the time. And I'm reading it, and I had what I always call a reverse revelation. Christians love to talk about the revelation. And I read this and said, I know all this stuff. I mean, like, every event of significance in the life of Jesus and his most important words and speeches, I knew them all, by virtue of growing up in the United States. I can say a complete Our Father. Never said one in church, as a prayer, but I know the words to it because I've heard them so many times. And I just sort of realized, God, I might as well be Christian. I don't know my own cultural background. So before I moved to Ecuador to get married and live in Ecuador for several years, I actually went to one of those, Jewish religious shops that used to dot the Lower East Side of Manhattan and now are in, Williamsburg, Brooklyn and stuff. And told the guy I want a Hebrew Bible, paralleling text, Hebrew and English. And I moved to Ecuador and got married and would accompany my wife to Mass every Sunday because we were just married and there was nothing else to do in this small city in the mountains of Ecuador. And, I'd sit there reading my Hebrew Bible. And, that's sort of when it started, and that was 30 years ago, practically. But, the same trajectory is followed in my crime fiction. I married a Latina from Ecuador and then went to live there for 3 years. And, it was such an exotic and different world and experience for me that I mined that for the material for, 5 novels and a half a dozen short stories. So, obviously it was a very rich experience for me doing this, and that's the Filomena Buscarcella series. You did a great job pronouncing it right. Most people do not get it right. So that was good.
Thank you.
I'm impressed. And so kind of the same thing, and then I gradually felt like, I'd like to do a Jewish-themed one, and try that. My hand at that. I've done this. My Philomena is an Ecuadorian Catholic, and she's devout and goes to Mass every week and that sort of thing. And at first, when I was still writing the series, my agent at the time said, yeah, well, your next contract's going to be for more Philomena, so that's what you're doing. And so, okay. So I did we had a 2-book contract, and I did those. And then she said, okay, now's the time. And I really had to immerse myself in this because I was not given a religious training. And, the Fifth Servant takes place in the 16th century. So these characters in 16th century Prague, which was the largest Jewish community in Europe at the time. So that's the place. And, of course, in the late 16th century, it's the home of Rabbi Judah Loew, of the Golem legends. And, one of the things was I knew that, well, these guys would have had the Bible memorized at age 10 or so, and then moved on to the Mishnah and the Talmud, and they would have known this stuff backwards and forwards. So, yeah, I had to do a ton of, sort of Judaic and religious research, and, without having any background. And I guess I did enough of a job because, when I was submitting the manuscript, I got responses saying, well, you're obviously a Talmudic scholar. And spoke to some, when the book came out, spoke to some Jewish reading groups where, they were actually, study groups that met in synagogue basements. And, they actually were sort of astonished, saying, like, we've been studying this stuff for years. How did you learn this? It's like, on my own, just doing the research. Which, incidentally, the Talmud does say you should only study in groups. So anyone who studies this stuff by himself is a fool. So there you go. But, I had no choice. I have a day job and an autistic son, and there was no way I was going to be able to spend years going to study groups. I mean, I had to do it on my own and just, immerse in the text. And also do comparative history. I had to do Czech history, German history, general Western European history, and that ties into something I'm working on right now. My current novel in progress, which has been interrupted by the Jewish noir madness, is another Jewish-themed historical, and the idea is a parallel story, modern and ancient, and the ancient part is the 6th century BC. So I had to do even more research for that one because basically I'm taking on the biblical era, so I feel like I'd better know what I'm talking about. I'm going to really annoy people if I don't know what I'm talking about. And I'll annoy them anyway, but... and then that involved immersing myself in, reading the first 5 books of the Bible, the books of Moses, which is the Torah, with like 8 different commentaries from ultra-Orthodox all the way to, modern feminist revisionist. One place where I tell my wife, Catholics do have to catch up is, we actually have sort of like feminist, conservative Jewish rabbis writing about this. I mean, come on, get with it.
Oh, the Catholics can catch up in a lot of areas.
I'm just saying.
I won't get into the politics of it.
So, yes. But, it's just, I'm allowed to say it because basically, hey, you Christians rule the world,
I'm not a Christian.
You took over, you had this great act, and you took it and played the world, and, so I get to say, hey, but we're ahead of you in this, we get to do that. So anyway, yes, I've been very much immersed in this, and so it's entirely appropriate that the Jewish noir come out. And I must say I'm actually pleasantly surprised that Jewish noir is actually getting more attention than anything I've done in years.
It's fantastic.
We did like 20 gigs in the last 3 weeks. I've logged more than 15,000 miles touring for this thing. I'm only just recovering. And, people are saying, like, they've seen us in the display window at Shakespeare and Company next to Gloria Steinem and Patti Smith. For whatever reason, something about Jewish noir is definitely grabbing attention. And in fact, we've already received one nomination, one Suspense Magazine's nomination for Best Anthology of 2015. So that's a great kickoff to what I hope are several more recognition. That would be nice.
Oh, you should. I mean, your books are great, and The Fifth Servant was just spectacular. I loved it. And I hadn't a clue, how I was going to feel about it, since I didn't know how I would relate to a very, very old, ancient story about the Jewish culture. I didn't know if it would resonate with me or what, but it was totally gripping. I hate to use that word, but that's what it was. I mean, impressive. And as for the Jewish noir, I'm enjoying the stories thoroughly.
Well, it was really hard for me to get, the world of 16th century Prague down on paper.
Yes, I can imagine.
One of the things I was going for was kind of this sense of pervasive doom. We may be walking the streets and breathing the air now, but any minute they could come for us.
Exactly.
Sort of in there, and I think sort of that's some of what Reed was talking about. When he says Jewish noir is redundant, and even though all the stories in the collection are 20th and 21st century, no historical pieces per se, although okay, they go back to the early 20th century, but it's still there. In fact, oddly enough, I did not expect this, but 3 of the authors submitted stories about being bullied for being Jewish in post-war American suburbia.
Wow.
That again, you would think it kind of has parallels with the the original noir sequence, because the post-war era is very paradoxical. On the one hand, everything's looking up in some ways. Hey, we won the war. We've become this global power. We're no longer just a continental power, a global power, and jobs pay really well. Because we're exporting our industry around the world, and all of that stuff. And yet, it's also the Cold War and fear of nuclear annihilation, and the McCarthy era, persecuting people for just having left-wing thoughts and ideas, and of course women were expected to stay home and go slowly crazy with boredom, and gays were in the closet, and blacks might be beaten half to death or lynched for trying to vote in the South. So you have this paradox. There's a reason the noir period comes out of that it's on the one hand. And, of course, the greatest economic expansion in U.S. history is post-World War II. So, it should be sunny. It's morning in America, and yet there's all this dark side to that. So, it was really curious. I did not expect 3 people to write about that. But, there's that other dark side. Post-war suburbia is supposed to be this symbol of, American progress and freedom and that sort of thing. And yet, several people wrote about the prejudice that exists, and also, I'm not spoiling anything by saying, and they fantasize about taking violent revenge on bullies. There's definitely some catharsis in some of these stories here. I appreciate your kind words about The Fifth Servant, because, of course, so many writers out there, I think, there's a lot of really great work that just didn't quite break through, didn't get the attention, didn't quite get the publicity, and that's one of the reasons, I felt so strongly about doing that with this collection. When I say not the usual suspects, there are a number of authors where exactly that, I feel like their work is really terrific and not enough people know them, and so that's why I invited them in here. And and I've already been deluged with comments about sort of, okay, when's Jewish Noir 2 coming, and why didn't you invite me? And it's sort of like, okay, first of all, it filled up in a second and went way over budget. It was supposed to be 15 to 20 people. It's 32 contributors, and it's an unbelievable amount of work, time and effort, and money, in terms of traveling around all over the place. And I'm certainly tantalized by, yes, Jewish Noir 2, but the last thing I want to do right now is that we're still doing the publicity for Jewish Noir, and waiting to ride through that cycle, and I've got my own novel in progress I've got to finish, or my agent will kill me. She will kill me if I stop work on my current novel in progress to do anything as insane as Jewish Noir 2 right now. But I've also got some real tantalizing hints from some of the authors who were too committed with other things to submit stories to Jewish noir, who have said, well, Jewish noir too. So we shall see. But yeah, got a few other things to survive first.
One day at a time.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to have to wrap up soon, but before I do, I simply have to ask you. I want to tell you that I've always been impressed by the fact that you were a self-published author in the pre-Kindle days.
Sure.
So can you talk a little bit about what it was like to publish your hard-boiled mysteries before it became so quote-unquote easy?
Right. Yes, no, the world has definitely changed. So you were talking about my first novel, 23 Shades of Black, was rejected by agents and editors for 9 years before I gave up on the notion of commercial publication, self-published, and it was nominated for the Edgar Allan Poe Award and the Anthony Award. So yeah, I've got my asterisk next to my name in the record books for that. And I'll just say it's not something I entered into lightly. I really did try several rounds of submissions and, tried to do it right. Queried people who I knew published things that I thought, would appeal to the same audience, and only sent manuscript in response to request for manuscript. And, every now and then someone said, after sending them the first 3 chapters, said, okay, send the rest. And, this is the late 1980s. That was quite some time ago. And, I'll just say the rejection letters got nicer, as the years went by.
I know what that's like.
So, yeah, yes, you do. And, because I had polished the work a bit, and I was, more specific in targeting who I was writing to. But, around 1995, 96, I just finally gave up. And, at that point, you actually had to publish a real book. And I actually went to the small press center in Manhattan to learn about how to do that. And it was like advice such as, you need to print the title and your name on the spine. Most books are displayed spine. I'm like, writing this stuff down, like, have a barcode, have a price, just look professional. And it wasn't something I entered into lightly, but as I say, after 9 years, I just gave up on the notion because I really did feel, and again, you and your listeners might relate, that, you send out a manuscript and everyone's looking like they take out their pen, or their blue pencil and like start marking things that they don't think are right or whatever. And I just felt like, all right, I just need to make this a book. And, you'll read it. You won't take out your pen. You'll either read it or you won't. And, at the time, yes, I actually had to do desktop publishing, prepare laser-ready, camera-ready, laser-printed stuff, print it myself. And I actually did go through the motions of, sending it out to the pre-publication sources. I made my own arcs, sent them out to, Booklist and all the others. And in fact, Booklist reviewed it. Somehow somebody pulled it from the pile and maybe read a few sentences and said, Jesus. And, so we had a legitimate review in Booklist. So when it was time to actually bind the book, I was able to put a real review from Booklist on it. And, I sent that out to the Edgar Allan Poe Committee. And, it was clearly a book from a small press, but, it wasn't obviously self-published. I did not know that there was a rule against self-published authors at the time. But it was just sort of pragmatic, like, they won't pay it any mind if they think it's self-published. But, it was also, my goal was to look professional for any market, and this was the book. And, as I say, it was clearly a small press book, but again, we had that Booklist review, and so we had a genuine blurb, and I guess I'll just say that, the strength of the work worked for us, and that, Booklist actually reviewed it. Then the key thing is distribution. What do? Okay, you've printed 2,000 books. They're sitting in your basement. And actually, Independent Publishers Group that actually distributes PM Press, which is publishing Jewish noir. So, Independent Publishers Group, actually called me up. And, the guy said, this is self-published, isn't it? Like, at the time, I was so naive. Like, how could you tell? And it's like, well, you're a one-book publisher I've never heard of. So, but then he said, I think you have a shot with this. We don't normally distribute self-published stuff, but I think this is good enough. So, there's a lesson there, that, you sort of, you can break the rules if somehow you've got something that if someone would just open it and start reading it.
Exactly.
They'd realize it. I'm very sensitive to that. The last trip, we did a bunch of gigs in the Bay Area, and I brought 4 books with me, 2 to read on the plane out and 2 to read on the plane back. Some with considerable hype, and not one of them really impressed me. On the way to Houston, I'm reading House of Sand and Fog by Andre Dubusse III, and that one's impressing me. I'm like, okay, there you go. Here's a great book, and it's actually of empathy with really good writers who just haven't broken through in that way. And again, as I say, it's a number of the authors I selected for this were for that reason as well. So there you have it.
Well, that's excellent, and thank you for talking about that, because, like I said, I've always been very impressed with not only your work, but your, let's say, marketing acumen, and your compassion for others who are in the position of trying to break through. It's a tough world, publishing, and You've done very well as an author, I think. You've done extremely well. And I wish you the best of luck with Jewish Noir and all your books. So,
I think I've, it's sort of like, I seem to remember I can't remember now, but one of a female pop artist who sort of, somebody asked, because, she sort of has a very devoted but a following, but it's not in the millions and millions. And some reporter asked her, how do you feel about, not being that successful? And, her answer was, I am successful. I've, made, several great albums. I just don't sell that much.
Exactly.
That's where I am.
How do you define success?
As we all know, there's plenty of stuff that sells in the millions that, some of us read and go,
Exactly.
So, yes.
It's a strange world that way.
Okay, so again, thank you for giving us your time and letting the world know about Jewish Noir and my other stuff.
Well, it was my pleasure, and thank you for being here.
Take care.
So, until next time, I just want to remind everybody that the Crime Cafe has a website where you can buy the 99-cent story package of first season stories from all the authors who appear on the Crime Cafe. Just go to debbimack.com or crimecafe.net and click on Crime Cafe. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you in 2 weeks.